All right, Joe, how's everybody doing today? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to day 18 of the 30-day Black History Lessons and Teachings from myself, Netchatep Ma'at, also known as Coach Titus. We are going to talk about Korea, the Melanated Bridge of East Asia. We're uncovering it. Okay, today is our third or fourth day where we're going to talk about Korea and touch on Vietnam because we're going to do that anchor tomorrow. Thailand, Vietnam, and that Pacific area there. Okay? Anyway, Korea's role as a bridge between continental and oceanic melanated civilizations, the refuge of the black-headed people, and the guardian of grid technologies through 5,000 plus years of continuous culture. Now, what did you learn in school? Korea is a small peninsula sandwiched between China and Japan. Korean culture is derivative of Chinese civilization, and Korea has always been a victim of its larger neighbors. But what the grid reveals is this: Korea is the eastern bridge of the planetary electromagnetic grid. It holds 40,000 ancient stone structures called dolmens, more than the entire rest of the world combined. Right? So this is like, so the Washita scale was 100,000. This one is 40,000. So you have to understand something. They're not just putting these things there for no reason, right? It's a part of a system. I've been trying to talk about this for the last 18 days, and I'm going to continue talking about it because it's very important. Okay? Now, these aren't just random graves. They're proof that Korea was a major grid hub where melanated knowledge from Africa through China met melanated knowledge from the Pacific Islands through Japan. Korea wasn't influenced by its neighbors. Korea was the meeting point where two streams of ancient melanated science merged and were preserved. Today's journey, we're tracing how the black-headed people from Limen, China, fled from China into Korea, and how Korea transmitted this knowledge to Japan, and how Korean innovations flowed back to China and down to Vietnam, and how Korea's indigenous grid technologies survived invasions, occupations, and attempts to erase them. Wow. The Melanated Foundation, the black-headed people arrive. The Li Min migration from China. Who were the Li Min? Let's find out. In ancient China, the Shang Dynasty from 1600 to 1046 before Common Era was ruled by a people who called themselves the Li Min, literally black-headed people. What they looked like: they had darker skin, bronze to dark brown, broader noses, kinky or coiled hair. These features appear in Shang Dynasty bronze sculptures and tomb paintings. What they brought to China: they brought bronze metallurgy, advanced casting techniques from the African knowledge stream. They brought oracle bone writing, ancestors of Chinese characters, the I-Ching, Book of Changes, mathematical divination system, and the astronomical calendar tracking celestial cycles for agriculture and ritual. The Great Invasion, 1046 before Common Era, the lighter-skinned Zhou people from the Western Mountains invaded Shang territory. The Zhou practiced a different culture, more pastoral, less urban, more warlike. When the Zhou overthrew the Shang dynasty, the Limin faced a choice: submit to the new rule or flee. They split into two groups. One fled east across the Pacific Ocean. These became the Olmec civilization in Mexico. We'll cover that on day 25. And the Olmec giant heads show clear African features because they are the Limin. Isn't that crazy? And the other group fled northeast into the Korean peninsula, merged with the existing Gojoseon Kingdom, founded in 2333 before Common Era. They brought superior bronze technology, astronomy, and writing. This is why Korean bronzes from this period are technologically superior to Chinese bronzes. The evidence in Korea: super bronze technology. Korean mandolin-shaped daggers from 1000 to 300 BCE have higher zinc content than Chinese bronzes, more durable, sharper edge, different casting techniques, two-piece mold system, and unique shapes not found in China. And where did this come from? This came from the Li Min. They brought refugee technology. They couldn't afford to be inferior to their conquerors, so they pushed their metallurgy even further. The 40,000 dolmens. After the Li Min arrived, Korea experienced an explosion of megalith construction. These dolmens, they are large stone structures and are identical to the ones in Stonehenge in England, the dolmens in Ireland and France, the dolmens in India, megalithic structures in North Africa. Same people, same knowledge, same planetary grid system. Got it? Good. And by the way, Korea has more of these structures than anywhere else on Earth because it became a major grid maintenance center after the Li Min arrived. Moving on. Now, the sacred mountain, Mount Paektu, where Korean civilization began. Mount Paektu sits on the border between modern North Korea and China. It's a volcanic mountain with a crater lake at the top called Heaven Lake. The founding myth, according to the Samguk Yusa, the Korean historical records, the god king Dangun was born on Mount Paektu in 2333 BCE. His father was Hwanong, a heavenly being who descended from the sky. His mother was Ngeno, a bear who transformed into a woman. The mainstream interpretation, mythology, not real history. Grid interpretation, Huanung, Sky Father, represents cosmic electromagnetic energy coming down from above. The descent from heaven equals electromagnetic field channeling through the mountain. Awesome. The Ungunio, the bear, the mother. The bear is sacred in melanated cultures worldwide. Strength, wisdom, and earth connection represents earth consciousness, the land itself. The transformation equals aligning earth energy with cosmic energy. The cave ritual. The myth says Unguneo stayed in a cave for 100 days, eating only garlic and mugwort until she became human. This is actual technology. Caves equal natural electromagnetic resonance chambers. Stone amplifies earth frequencies. Darkness activates the pineal gland. Your third eye needs darkness to function fully. And garlic and mugwort equals plants with specific chemical properties that cleanse the body and enhance biofield sensitivity. 100 days equals complete physiological transformation cycle. Dangun equals the first grid operator. The child born from this union, cosmic and earth, represents the perfected human. Someone aligned with both heaven and earth, capable of maintaining the grid. Why Mount Paektu specifically? It's a volcano. Magma beneath equals molten metal, natural electrical conductor. Volcanic activity equals Earth's electromagnetic field is exposed. Thin crust, direct mantle access. And crater lake at the peak equals water and minerals, and elevation equals a perfect electromagnetic capacitor. Mount Paektu is a natural grid amplifier. This is why both North and South Korea claim it as sacred. It's not just symbolic, it's the anchor point for the entire Korean grid system. Moving on, we have the Hwang, Korea's sacred warrior class, training the next generation of grid operators. During the Three Kingdoms period, 57 BCE to 668 CE Common Era, Korea was divided into three kingdoms: the Goguryeo in the north, Baekje in the southwest, and the Silla in the southeast. The Silla Kingdom created an elite training program called the Hwang, Flower Knights. Who were the Hwang? Young men ages 15 to 25 selected for noble character, physical ability, intellectual potential. They were trained in martial arts, swordsmanship, archery, hand-to-hand combat, early taekwondo, And grid purpose equals electromagnetic field manipulation through precise body movement. They're also trained in poetry and music, composing verse, playing instruments, singing. Grid purpose, sound as frequency technology. They learn to use voice and instruments to harmonize with Earth's frequencies. What else? They were trained in Buddhist philosophy, meditation, compassion, detachment from the material world, their grid purpose, consciousness training, learning to operate in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Oddly enough, their particular training sounds like what I want to do with Rise Omniversity, Rise United Omniversity. Same thing, playing instruments, martial arts, meditation, compassion, detachment from the material world. Great stuff, man. What else? Confucian ethics, loyalty to the king, um, filial piety, honoring parents, sincerity with friends, courage in battle, justice in killing. Their grid purpose, these are Ma'at principles, cosmic order, balance, righteousness. Same system, man. Originated in Africa and spread. Why? Because all those melanated populations were from the migration of Africans. Okay? Number 5, mountain meditation retreats. Herwang would spend weeks or months on sacred mountains, Mount Kumgang and Mount Jiri, living in nature, fasting, meditating, and training. This is awesome. Grid purpose, mountains are natural electromagnetic amplifiers. They were charging their biofields at grid nodes. Why this matters? The Hawang weren't just soldiers, they were grid operators in training. This is identical to African initiation rites, transforming boys into men in sacred groves, Egyptian mystery school training, spiritual warriors serving Ma'at, Shaolin monk training, martial arts and spiritual cultivation, and Native American vision quests, young men going into wilderness for transformation. The same training system on different continents because it's all part of one grid maintenance tradition. Woo! Their Hwang's achievements. Kim Il-sung, a Hwang member, led the military campaigns that unified the Korean peninsula under Silla rule in 668 Common Era. After unification, the Hwang tradition gradually faded. The knowledge went underground, but the martial arts survived and evolved into Taekyon, ancient Korean martial art, and eventually Taekwondo, modern form. See the evolution? Korean shamanism, the indigenous grid religion, the Modang, Korea's grid priestesses. While Buddhism and Confucianism came from outside, Korea had its own indigenous spiritual systems. Muism, Korean shamanism. The Modang are shamans, mostly women who maintain the spiritual and energetic health of communities. And what do the Modang do? Those ladies, they perform rituals called gut to communicate with ancestors and spirits, heal physical and mental illness, ensure good fortune for families, predict the future, guide the dead to the afterlife. The mainstream view, superstition, folk religion, dying tradition. The grid view, Mudang are grid priestesses maintaining the energetic network. How a good ritual works. The grid decoded. Colorful silk costumes. Mudang wear multiple layers of bright silk in specific colors: red, blue, yellow, white, and black. Each color equals a different frequency of light. By wearing all colors, they're creating a full spectrum activation in their biofield. Dance and spinning, Mudang spin counterclockwise, opposite Earth's rotation, for extended periods. I wondered about that. I used to see that all the time. This creates a biofield vortex like a tornado of energy around their body. This is identical to Sufi whirling dervishes, I've done that before, and African spirit possession dances, voodoo, candomblé, and santeria. Same technology, different cultures. Drums, gongs, and bells, the jangu, hourglass-shaped drum, and the Kuonegawari, small gong, produce specific frequencies that entrain the brain to the theta delta states, deep trance, and synchronize the crowd's biofields. Everyone present starts to resonate together. Isn't that awesome? Oh my God. Spirit possession. At the peak of the ritual, the mudang often gets into trance and becomes an ancestor of spirit. What's really happening? The mudang is tuning her biofield to an ancestral frequency stored in the grid. She's accessing consciousness data from people who lived before. This is not supernatural, it's advanced biofield technology that our ancestors understood and modern science is only beginning to measure. Isn't that incredible? So all these cultures have ancestral worship. And all the time I was wondering, well, how does it work? Well, that's how it works. They're doing it in, around areas that have lots of energy. They know where to dance, your rain dances, all that kind of stuff. All that came from African culture. This is amazing. Wow. So here we are again. Why shamanism was suppressed. Confucianism, imported from China. Patriarchal system, men in charge. Rationalists, rejected spirits as superstition. The Mudang, mostly women, threatened Confucian male authority. Christianity, imported during Japanese occupation. Missionaries labeled shamanism as devil worship. The converted Koreans were taught to fear their own traditions. Where have you heard that before? Modernization. Shamanism equals backward. Korea wanted to appear modern to the world. Grid knowledge equals hidden or destroyed. But it survives. Today, you can still find Mudang performing gut in Seoul, Busan, and especially Jeju Island, southern tip of Korea. Young Koreans are rediscovering shamanism, not as superstition, but as ancestral wisdom. K-dramas and films now depict Mudang as powerful figures, not jokes. Their grid knowledge is returning. Yay! Now we get into the knowledge transmission. Japan did not develop in isolation. The Kingdom served as a maritime bridge, transmitting the foundational operating system of Japanese civilization. Of the three kingdoms, Baekje, Southwest Korea, had the strongest connection to Japan. What Baekje transmitted to Japan? Well, one, Buddhism. 6th century Common Era. Buddhism arrived in Korea from China and India and was transmitted to Japan via Baekje monks and scholars. But Buddhism isn't just a religion, it's encoded grid science. Mudras, hand positions, equals biofield manipulation, right? All that stuff. Mantras, chants equals frequency technology. Mandalas, geometric diagrams equals sacred geometry blueprints. And meditation, pineal gland activation. The writing systems. The Baekje scholars introduced Chinese characters to Japan, which became the basis for Japanese kanji. Architecture, Korean architects designed and built early Japanese Buddhist temples. The construction techniques, wooden joinery, curved roof lines, specific proportions, aren't just aesthetics. They're based on sacred geometry principles that create harmonic resonance in the buildings. Where have you heard that before? It's Moorish culture. Unbelievable. Metallurgy. Korean swordsmiths and bronze workers transmitted metalworking techniques to Japan. Japanese sword making eventually became world famous, but the original technology came through Korea. Martial arts. Korean taekyon, high kicking, fluid combat style, influenced Japanese martial arts development. The genetic connection, the Y-DNA haplogroup O associated with rice farmers, showed the migration pattern, southern China to Korea to Japan, right? This explains why Koreans and Japanese share genetic markers. But here's the key difference. Japanese have high rates of HTLV1 or I, ancient retrovirus from Pacific melanated peoples, and Koreans have low rates of this. Continental population absorbed, replaced maritime groups. What this means, Japan's Jomon people, the indigenous maritime population, that's their black population, were connected to the Pacific Melanated Network, which is Polynesia and the Philippines, etc. Korea's population was more continental, connected to Asian mainland, melanated populations like the Lee Min. Korea equals the bridge where both streams met. So moving forward, what we find is that Korea taught China. Yes, really, Korea taught China. The narrative that Korea copied everything from China is colonial propaganda. Here's a proof Korea was an independent knowledge center that transmitted to China. The Ondal heating system. The Ondal heating system is underfloor heating using channels beneath a stone floor. Invented in Korea, 5000 BCE, the Neolithic period. There's archaeological evidence of this, right? It spread to China as Kang beds, 3000 BCE, 2000 years later. How it works: fire in the kitchen, smoke or heat travels through horizontal stone channels under the floor. Heat radiates upward, warming the entire room. Smoke exits through a chimney. But the real function, the stone floor acts as a geothermal electromagnetic conductor. Heat activates the piezoelectric properties of the stone, granite, basalt, which generates a subtle electromagnetic field. People sleeping on Ondal report deeper sleep, pain relief, and faster healing. This isn't just heat, it's electromagnetic field therapy. Korea taught this to China, not the other way around. The Celadon pottery, the one that you're looking at right there. Korean Celadon jade green ceramic from the Goryeo Dynasty was so superior that Chinese emperors imported it. That's right. Chinese potters tried to copy the technique but could never match the quality. But what made it special? Special clay composition, had iron oxide in it. Exact firing temperature, 1250 to 1300 degrees Celsius. Reduction atmosphere. Oxygen starved the kiln. The result, a crystalline glaze structure that creates unique light refraction and sound properties. Celadon bowls ring when struck, producing specific tones. The grid function, the crystalline structure acts as an electromagnetic resonator. These weren't just dishes, they were ritual objects used in ceremonies. The technology was lost after the Mongol invasions, destroyed the kilns and killed the master potters. But this proves Korea had advanced material science that China didn't possess. Martial arts. Korean sabak and taekyon influenced Chinese martial arts during the Three Kingdoms period. Korean warriors served as mercenaries in Chinese courts, transmitting combat techniques. And now combat techniques, yes, thank you. Okay, moving on. Moving on. Vietnam, the southern anchor, is Korea. If Korea is the processor, Vietnam is the connection to the global power source. What is Vietnam's role in the East Asian grid? Vietnam sits at the southern tip of the East Asian mainland connecting north to China, continental grid, east of the Pacific Islands, maritime grid, and west to India via Southeast Asian corridor. The Dongsan culture, 1000 BCE to 1 Common Era. The Dongsan people, northern Vietnam, created some of the world's most sophisticated bronze drums. These drums were decorated with geometric patterns, grid encoding, feature boats and warriors, maritime knowledge. Some drums are over 1 meter tall, weighing hundreds of pounds. The casting technology rivals ancient Egypt and Shang, China. Where did this come from? Bronze technology traveled from India to Southeast Asia to Vietnam to China, Korea, and then Japan. Vietnam was a transmission point. on this route. The Sham people, who are Austronesian melanated group. The Sham inhabited coastal Vietnam from the 2nd to the 19th centuries Common Era. Who were they? Dark-skinned seafaring people. They built Hindu Buddhist temples. My son Punagar. Language and culture connected to Indonesia, Philippines, and Polynesia. Their grid function, the Sham were part of the Pacific Maritime Network, the same network that connected to Japan's Jomon people. The evidence, Sham architecture uses Indian temple designs showing transoceanic contact. Sham language is Austronesian, same family as the Hawaiian, Maori, and the Tagalog. DNA shows connections to Pacific Island populations. Vietnam's grid function, southern anchor, balancing Korea's eastern position. Vietnam and Korea equals two pillars holding up the East Asian energy circuit. Vietnam connects Indian Ocean grid to the Pacific grid. Korea connects the continental Asia grid to the Pacific grid. Together, they create a complete circuit. Moving on, we have the Tripitaka Korean, the Koreana knowledge. Okay, what's that? The Tripitaka Korean knowledge hard drive. 81,258 wooden printing blocks. Wow. In the 13th century, during the Goryeo Dynasty, Korean monks created the Tripitaka Koreana, the most complete collection of Buddhist scriptures in the world. Physical specs, 8,100, oh wow, 81,258 wooden printing blocks. Each block carved on both sides by hand, no errors. Total weight, 280 tons. Stored at Hyansa Temple, a mountain monastery. How did they make it? Wood selection. Birch wood from Jeju Island, southern tip of Korea, soaked in seawater for 3 years. Salt and minerals equals preservation and electromagnetic properties. Boiled, dried, and carved with precision. Covered in lacquer poison, prevents insect damage. Storage building, Janyong Panjian, built in 1488 with no modern technology. Perfect ventilation through scientifically positioned windows and floors. Blocks have survived 600 plus years in perfect condition. And what does the mainstream say about that? Amazing architecture and luck. Sure. The grid. The grid says the building is positioned at a specific mountain grid node where the natural electromagnetic field preserves the wood. What's actually encoded? These aren't just religious texts. The Buddhist scriptures contain mudras, hand positions for biofield manipulation. It contains mantras, sound codes, or frequency technology. It contains mandalas, sacred geometry diagrams, and it contains meditation instructions for consciousness technology. This is software for human consciousness stored on wooden hard drives. This is amazing. Buddhist monks chant these scriptures, which activates the encoded frequencies. Why 81,258 blocks specifically? 81 equals 9 times 9. 9 is completion, the highest single digit. 258 equals 2 plus 5 plus 8 equals 15. 1 plus 5 equals 6. 6 is harmony and balance. The number itself is harmonic encoding, not random. Moving on. The Turtle Ships Maritime Grid Defense. Admiral Yi Sun Sin and the Gojoseon in 1592. When Japan invaded Korea in 1592, the Imjin War, Korean Admiral Yi Sun Sin defended the peninsula using a revolutionary ship design, the Gojoseon, the turtle ship. That's pretty amazing. The design features iron-plated roof, Hexagonal spikes covering the deck looks like a turtle shell. Iron equals electromagnetic conductor. Hexagons equals sacred geometry. It appears in nature, honeycombs, basalt columns, and snowflakes. Dragon head front, the carved dragon head at the bow. Mouth emits smoke and sulfur, psychological warfare. The grid meaning. Asian cultures visualize electromagnetic currents as dragons. The dragon head represents the ship's electromagnetic field. How you know that is that they call the ley lines or the iron veins of the earth, they call them dragon lines. Right? So that's a connection there. Low profile ship sits low in the water, hard to see, hard to hit, closer to seawater, which is highly electrically conductive. The ramming capability, reinforced iron bow for ramming enemy ships. Physical impact plus iron hull equals generates electromagnetic pulse on contact. Admiral Yi's record, 23 battles fought, 23 victories, never lost, often outnumbered 10 to 1 or worse. Conventional history, brilliant tactics and superior technology. The grid history, Yu Sun Sin was a grid operator using electromagnetic enhanced naval technology. The turtle ship wasn't just armor, it was a mobile grid node. What this proves, Korean maritime technology in the 16th century was world class, not backward as the colonial narrative claims. King Sejong, the scientist king, the Joseon Dynasty's golden age was 1418 to 1450. King Sejong the Great ruled Korea from 1418 to 1450. The mainstream, he invented the Korean alphabet, the Hangul, great reformer. What they don't tell you though is Sejong's scientific achievements, the Hangul alphabet, 1443. Sejong spent years studying phonetics, the science of sound, human anatomy, how the mouth or tongue creates sounds. That matches up with the Galagichi as well. That's a real tradition from indigenous cultures. And the linguistics, how language works. He consulted Buddhist monks, Confucian scholars, and common people. The result, the most scientifically designed writing system ever created. Each letter's shape equals the position of your tongue or mouth when making that sound. But there's more. Consonants are based on geometric forms, right angles, squares, and circles. Vowels are based on heaven, earth, human trinity. Vertical lines equals heaven, horizontal equals earth. This is sacred geometry encoded into everyday writing. Sejong understood that writing is frequency technology. The shapes you draw affect your consciousness, which is why a lot of Asian cultures did calligraphy, and a lot of cultures did calligraphy, right? Writing is very important, right? That's what they say the pen is mightier than the sword, right? Astronomical instruments. Sejong scientists created water clocks, automated timekeeping, sundials, Armorelli spheres, these 3D models of the celestial sphere, and star charts. Why? Why did they do it? Sejong wrote, we must harmonize our kingdom's calendar and rituals with the movements of heaven. The translation, synchronizing the earthly grid with the celestial grid. The rain gauge, another thing. Korea invented the rain gauge in 1441, 200 years before Europe. Why measure rainfall so precisely? Because agriculture depends on water, and water distribution is tied to what? Earth's electromagnetic field patterns. Sejong was tracking grid data. This is pretty amazing, man. Music theory. Sejong studied Chinese music theory, but found it incomplete for Korea. He wrote, the sounds of Korean music must harmonize with the land and people of Korea. He understood that each geographic location has specific resonant frequencies. Music must match the local grid harmonics to be effective. Very nice. The Japanese occupation, systemic grid destruction. From 1910 to 1945, an energetic warfare. When Japan occupied Korea between 1910 and 1945, they didn't just rule politically. They waged systematic grid warfare designed to break Korea's energetic infrastructure. One, metal spikes driven into mountains. What happened? Japanese surveyors drove iron spikes into Korean mountains at specific locations across the peninsula. What do you think they did that for? The official reason? Survey markers for railroad construction. Sounds pretty much the same as America, isn't it? Crazy, man. The truth. Korean geomancy experts, Pung Su, similar to Feng Shui, identified these spikes locations as energy meridians, the major electromagnetic flow points in the mountains. So they did that purposefully, right? You can just drive them anywhere. They put them into places that had electrical nodes there or electrical energy. It's like acupuncture in reverse. So instead of needles to heal, they use spikes to harm, the same way that America used the system of erasure by changing names, right? Instead of using those names to make things better, they use them to make things worse for the indigenous populations. Terrible, right? The evidence. After Korean independence in 1945, Korean shamans, the Mundang, reported that mountains felt dead or blocked. In the 1990s to the 2000s, the South Korean government removed some of these spikes as part of cultural restoration efforts. When the spikes were removed, Mudang reported feeling energy return to those mountains. Number two, what they do, they force name changes. 1939, Soshi Kamai policy. Koreans were forced to adopt Japanese names. Wow, sounds like America, doesn't it? Official reasoning, assimilation, creating unity between Korea and Japan. But the real reason, names carry frequency signatures. Your name is a sound pattern that you respond to your entire life. It shapes your identity and connects you to your ancestors. Changing millions of Korean names equals severing ancestral connections. This breaks the intergenerational energy link that allows consciousness and knowledge to flow from ancestors to descendants. The suppressing of the Korean language. What happened? Korean language banned in school. Only Japanese could be taught. This sounds very similar all over the world. Books written in Korean were burned. Speaking Korean in public could result in punishment. Official reason? Educational modernization. The real reason? Language encodes cultural memory and grid knowledge. Every language contains unique sound frequencies, cultural concepts that don't translate, and ancestral wisdom embedded in idioms and stories. You destroy the language, you erase the operating manual for the grid. This is why indigenous languages worldwide have been systematically suppressed. They contain knowledge the colonizers don't want you to have. The comfort woman system. What happened? An estimated 200,000 plus Korean women and women from other occupied territories were forced into sexual slavery for Japanese soldiers. Wow. Official reasoning? Providing services for the military. The deeper violation. This was systematic trauma directed at the female population. In many Greek traditions, women are the primary conductors and maintainers of the energy field. Women's bodies are more bioelectrically sensitive, proven by modern science, by the way. Women carry and birth new life, connecting ancestors to the descendants. Women in Korea shamanism, the Mudang, are the grid priestesses. This was mass trauma to women, breaking the grid's transmission mechanism. They really destroyed their culture, man. Holy. And then the final blow, as if it wasn't enough already, the 38th parallel, 1953. After World War II, Korea was divided at the 38th parallel into North and South. The Korean War from 1950 to 1953 ended with an armistice creating the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone, a 4-kilometer wide strip cutting across the entire peninsula. What this did energetically, the DMZ physically splits the Korean grid north to south. It's like cutting a major artery. The energy cannot flow properly anymore. The evidence, 1 to 2 million landmines buried in the DMZ. Did you hear that? 1 to 2 million landmines buried in the DMZ. Explosive devices create chaotic electromagnetic fields. Military technology, radar, communications creates constant electromagnetic pollution. Barbed wire, electric fences equals physical and energetic barriers. Result, Korean people on both sides experience collective trauma because their land's energy field is severed. This isn't metaphorical, it is measurable. Why this matters for unification. Korean unification isn't just a political issue, it's grid restoration. To truly heal, you must remove the landmines and clear the electromagnetic interference, plant trees and vegetation in the DMZ corridor, organic electromagnetic conductors, and build dolmen-style stones along the former border. Re-establish harmonic markers. Perform a reunification ceremony at the midpoint, which is a ritual to reconnect the grid energetically. Healing the land equals healing the people. Same thing as America. Wow. This is funny, eh? It's funny, but it's not funny. Like, wow. So, the complete melanated network. So, just in review, how does it all connect? Well, the full picture of how melanated knowledge flowed through East Asia. Africa was the starting point, or the origin point. Then we have India via ancient Nile, Red Sea, Indian Ocean route. And that was through to the Dravidian Vedas. And then we have the Southeast Asia. So it goes to Southeast Asia, which would be Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia. Dongson culture and the Shang people, all melanated. China, the Shang Dynasty, the Li Min, melanated rulers with African source knowledge. These are all melanated seeds. Korea, Li Min refugees, plus the indigenous dolmen builders merge knowledge streams. And then on to Japan, the Baekje transmission and earlier Jomon maritime people, melanated peeps, plus the Pacific route, right? So the other way, we got Africa, the Pacific Islands, which is Polynesia and Melanesia. Then they move on to Japan, to the Jomon people, the melanated seed there. Then they move on to Korea, the coastal populations, especially the Jeju Island. Korea sits at the crossroads where both streams meet. Continental melanated knowledge from China in the west, maritime melanated knowledge from Japan of the Pacific east, and Korea receives from both, transmits to both. Vietnam anchors the southern end of the same circuit. This wasn't four separate civilizations developing independently, yo. This was one network with specialized nodes built and maintained by melanated peoples who understood the planetary grid. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today. Day 18 has been completed. I hope you enjoyed this lesson and teachings. The 30-day Black History segment, almost over, yo. 11 more days, right? But I hope you're learning. I hope you're researching and reading. And I hope you have questions. You can challenge me because, knowledge flows, man. And it changes too, right? Knowledge changes over time because our perception changes over time. So we should always be up on our knowledge, learning, finding out about ourselves, right? So all you melanated peeps, right? Understand something. The reason that you are the beginning is because melanation had to actually, as you move and you migrate, melanation became less, right? So the spread of that knowledge and the spread of the people happened because, wow, what happened here? Oh no, did I do something here? I must have done something because it looks a little different right now. What the hell? Where'd it go? I don't know. Am I in the wrong frequency here? What's happening? Does this say here? Here. Okay. I messed up. Anyway, everybody, thanks for coming out. And we'll see you tomorrow, day 19. The route south to Indonesia and the Pacific. Coming at you. You're going to find out the melanated beginnings of the route to the south and Indonesia and the Pacific. All right, get ready. This one's going to be a great one. Everybody, have yourself a great night. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow.